but it's the truth of God's word. Not the truth of what you think, not the truth of what you feel, not the truth of what your favorite pastor is saying. It's the truth of God's word. So you stay anchored by staying in God's word. So if you're not anchored, maybe you got away from God's word. Maybe you're not putting enough word in you. The second way to stay anchored is build a prayer life. Anchors need to be dropped. Anchors need to be dropped. Prayer connects you to the bottom line, which is God himself. Where is your altar? God began to share this with me, and I promise you, I got up and screamed because he began to show me. He said, your anchor is only as strong as your altar. Your anchor is only as strong as your altar. When I thought about that, I was brought back to the moment when my dad passed away. Why was my anchor so strong? Because I had an altar. Why was my anchor so strong? Because I had a prayer life. Why was my anchor so strong? Because I spent time with the Father. Why was my anchor so strong? Because I had an altar. Yes. Your anchor is only as strong as your altar. So if you feel like your anchor is always falling, if you feel like your anchor is always breaking, if you feel like you're always moved to and fro, God is saying your anchor is only strong as your prayer life. Yes. You can't depend on somebody else's anchor. No. I can't depend on my wife's anchor. I can in a sense because that's my rib, that's my wife, but I can't depend on my neighbor's anchor. If my neighbor has a boat over here and I have a boat, it doesn't matter how strong their anchor is, my boat can sink. Yes. Your anchor is only as strong as your altar. Anchor, spiritually, this represents your ability to stay grounded, stable, and unshaken in the storms of life. Your hope, faith, and resilience in God. Again, your anchor represents your stability to stay grounded. You can only stay grounded when you have an altar. But what is your altar? This refers to the place of sacrifice. And that's not a cuss word. That's a real word. Sacrifice. This refers to the place of sacrifice, prayer, worship, and connection with God. It's not always a physical place. It's a spiritual posture where you meet God consistently. Where is your altar? Because your anchor is only as strong as your altar. And I hear God saying, you got to have an altar before you have an anchor. And you have to have both of those before the storms come. You can't try to find your altar or your anchor in the midst of a storm because it's too late. The spiritual meaning, your strength, your spiritual strength is directly tied to your spiritual discipline. Your spiritual strength, which is your anchor, is directly tied to your spiritual discipline, your altar. If you don't have spiritual strength, maybe you need to check your altar. Check your spiritual discipline.